Every kingdom has one secret that could burn the crown to ash. In Thornwick, that secret had a name and a signature on a piece of paper hidden inside a locked drawer for 11 years. When the young prince finally found it, he did not just uncover a lie. He uncovered a deal that had quietly decided who would rule after the king was gone, and it was not him. What Prince Aldrich did next would force his father to make a decision so shocking that even the palace guards, who had seen scandal after scandal, could not believe their own ears. This is the story of a hidden deal, a betrayal wrapped in silk, and a king who finally had to choose between the woman he loved and the son he was supposed to protect. The palace of Thornwick stood on a hill above the river, its gray stone towers catching the last light of evening like old armor still standing guard. Inside, the halls were quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes after years of practiced silence. Prince Aldrich had grown up in that silence. He had learned, the way all royal children learn, which doors not to open and which questions not to ask. He was 26 now, tall and serious, with his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn jaw. His mother, Queen Eleanor, had died when he was 15. 2 years later, King Varian remarried a noblewoman from the eastern provinces named Isolde, who wore warmth like a coat she could take off whenever she pleased. Aldrich had never trusted her. He could not say exactly why. It was small things. The way she paused half a second too long before answering a simple question, the way her eyes moved around a room like she was counting exits. For 9 years he had kept his distance and kept his suspicions to himself. His father seemed happy, and that had been enough reason to stay quiet. But happiness, Aldrich was about to learn, can be built on paper that was never meant to be found. It started with a broken lock. The old study on the 3rd floor had belonged to his mother. After she died, King Varian sealed it and never spoke of it again. Nobody used the room. Nobody was supposed to. But the manor was old, and old wood swells and cracks with the seasons, and one autumn evening the ancient lock on the study door simply gave way when a maid leaned against it while carrying linens. She did not go in. She reported it to the steward, who reported it to Aldrich, since it had been his mother's room and matters concerning her were quietly rooted to him out of respect. Aldrich told himself he was only going to check that nothing had been disturbed. He told himself this while walking up the stairs. He told himself this while pushing open the heavy door and stepping into a room that smelled of dust and old paper, frozen in time from 9 years before. His mother's writing desk still sat by the window. Her books were still on the shelves. It should have felt sacred. Instead, his eyes caught on something that did not belong, a drawer in the desk that had been forced open at some point in the past and then pushed shut again, not quite flush with the frame. Someone else had been in this room, recently, judging by the absence of dust on the drawer's edge. He should have left it alone. He opened it instead. Inside was a folder, tied with a ribbon that had once been royal blue and was now faded to gray. He untied it with hands that were, he noticed distantly, not entirely steady. Inside were letters, correspondence between his father and a court official named Lord Brennick, dated to the months right after Aldrich's mother had died. And beneath the letters, a document with 2 signatures at the bottom. One was his father's. The other was Isolde's, but the date on the paper was nearly a full year before she had officially been introduced to the court as the king's intended bride. A year before anyone in Thornwick had supposedly even met her. Aldrich read the document twice, then a 3rd time because the meaning refused to sit still in his mind. It was not a marriage contract. It was something colder than that, an agreement. In exchange for her family's silence about certain debts owed by the crown to Eastern lenders, and in exchange for a substantial transfer of land along the river border, Isolde would marry the king, and any children she bore would stand ahead of Aldrich in matters of succession to the smaller but wealthy province of Calderwood, which had always, by tradition, been set aside for the firstborn. It was not treason. It was not strictly illegal. Kings had made stranger arrangements for stranger reasons throughout Thornwick's long history, but it meant his father had chosen Isolde before Aldrich's mother's grave had even properly settled. It meant the warmth Aldrich had watched his father rebuild over the years had a price tag attached to it from the very beginning, negotiated like a trade agreement. And it meant that somewhere, quietly, his own inheritance had already been reshaped without a single word to him. He sat in his dead mother's study for a long time before he moved again. For 3 days, Aldrich said nothing. He watched his father at dinner, laughing at something Isolde said, reaching over to refill her glass with the easy familiarity of 9 years of marriage. He watched Isolde too, differently now, the way she directed conversation, the way she mentioned Calderwood more often than seemed natural, always lightly, always in passing, the way a person mentions something they already consider theirs. On the 4th day, he confronted his father alone, in the small library where Varian liked to read before bed. He did not shout. He had promised himself he would not shout. He simply placed the folder on the table between them and watched his father's face change, not with confusion, but with the particular stillness of a man who has been waiting 9 years for a knock on a door he hoped would never come. "You knew this day might come?" Aldrich said quietly. "Tell me why." King Varian did not deny it. He was not, whatever else he was, a coward. He explained it plainly. The debts had been real and dangerous, threatening to bankrupt the eastern trade routes that half the kingdom depended on. Isolde's family had the means to make the problem disappear quietly, without the shame of a public bailout that would have weakened the crown for a generation. The arrangement had been Lord Brennick's idea, brokered in secret, agreed to in a moment when Varian was still raw with grief and terrified for his kingdom's future. "I never meant to take anything from you," his father said. "I meant to protect the crown." "You protected the crown by trading away my mother's province before I even knew you were courting someone new," Aldrich answered. "Did you ever plan to tell me? Or was I only meant to find out when the papers were read after your death, standing in a room full of people who already knew?" Varian had no good answer for that. Grief and shame, it turned out, look almost identical on an old king's face. Word travels fast inside stone walls. By the next morning, Isolde knew that the folder had been found. She came to Aldrich directly, which surprised him. He had expected avoidance, not confrontation. She did not apologize. Instead, she laid out her own version, colder and more practical than his father's had been. She had married for security, yes, but she had also, in her own way, kept her side of every promise for 9 years. She had never asked for more than what was written. She had never moved against Aldrich in any real sense. The document was old business, finished business, and dragging it into the light now would only humiliate a dying king and unravel a peace that had held the eastern border stable for nearly a decade. "You want me to bury it?" Aldrich said. "I want you to think about what digging it up actually costs everyone," she replied, "including you." He almost believed she meant it kindly, almost. The truth reached the wider court within the week, not through Aldrich, who had told no one outside the family, but through Lord Brennick himself, now old and afraid of dying with the secret unconfessed, who quietly informed 2 senior council members out of some private need for absolution. From there, it spread the way all court secrets spread, slowly at first, then all at once. By the time the full council convened to address it formally, the kingdom already knew, in the way kingdoms always know things, through servants, through merchants, through the particular silence that falls over a market square when everyone is talking about the same thing without saying it aloud. King Varian stood before his council with Isolde on one side of the room and Aldrich on the other, and for the first time in 9 years, he looked genuinely uncertain of what to say. He did not choose sides in the way anyone expected. He did not banish Isolde, as some council members quietly hoped, nor did he strip Aldrich of any claim to smooth things over with her family, as others feared he might. Instead, he did something that stunned the entire hall into silence. He announced that Calderwood would remain, exactly as tradition demanded, the birthright of his firstborn son. The original agreement, he declared, was void, not because it had been illegal, but because a king who trades his own child's inheritance to solve a crisis is not protecting his crown. He is mortgaging his family's future to buy himself an easier decade. He turned to Isolde and told her in front of the full council that their marriage would stand on nothing but what it had genuinely become over 9 years, or it would not stand at all. No more arrangements. No more silent debts settled through succession. If she stayed as his wife, not as a creditor holding a signed paper. Isolde, to everyone's surprise, did not argue. Whatever the marriage had started as, something in her expression suggested it had become something else along the way, and she was not willing to lose it over a province she had never truly needed. Aldrich watched his father say all of this, and felt something in his chest loosen for the first time in 9 years, not because he had won some contest of inheritance, but because his father had finally chosen honesty over convenience, publicly, at real cost to himself. The kingdom did not erupt into chaos, as some had feared. It did something quieter and more lasting instead. It watched an old king admit a mistake in front of everyone who mattered, and rather than weakening him, it made people trust him a little more. A crown built on hidden deals is fragile. A crown that survives its own confession is not. In the months that followed, Aldrich took a more visible role in Calderwood's affairs, learning it not as a birthright handed to him on paper, but as a responsibility he now understood the true cost of. He and his father spoke more often, carefully, the way two people rebuild something after it has cracked. Isolde, for her part, stopped mentioning Calderwood at all, in passing or otherwise. The locked study on the third floor was never sealed again. Aldrich had it opened properly, aired out, the books dusted and returned to their shelves. It became, in time, a place he visited often, not to search for anything else hidden inside it, but simply to sit where his mother once sat, in a room that no longer held any secrets at all.